Welcome to the Inside. Very excited today to have a special guest. Grady Crosby is joining me. He's the VP of Public Affairs and Chief Diversity Officer for Johnson and Controls. Grady, thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
I just want to thank you for the invitation. Not too many people want to hear from the public affairs officer of a company. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these really important matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe that's that's the fact that we don't hear enough from the public affairs department maybe a sign that we maybe need to hear more because I met you. I saw you speak at Securing New Ground, the SIA conference that's on, and you talked about diversity and inclusion, and it was a very moving presentation and call to action, and a lot of really good stuff that people still today are talking about it. So, congratulations for reaching people in a medium that's sometimes hard to do, where there's a lot of video and content going on. But I want to thank you very much for what you did there, and my hope was to take that and then continue the conversation as well, because it's I think it's like you said, it's a very important one that we need to have.
Yeah, great. I'm happy that people gained a little bit more awareness to where they are on their journey towards a more inclusive, equitable society. And again, as I said at the Secure New Ground conference, it really starts with taking a very introspective look as to where you are, because we really believe that the first kind of litmus test for any company or individual is to make sure that they are in a position to contribute to the overall good. So as I said there, a company that is engaged in producing products or services that are harmful is really going to have a hard time in the space of trying to do good and spread some corporate good or be a good community citizen. So initially, it takes that self-awareness that you have to make sure that you're aligned in a product or service that at the end of the day will hopefully leave people, the environment, the community a little better than it was before your introduction to that space.
Yeah, no, and that. So on that, and before I definitely want to get into your background actually, because I think, and also public affairs as a whole, because it's we don't hear, like you said, very much from the public affairs department. So it'd be great to hear some of that works in there. But on that note, if we can jump right into one of these things. So in having a lot of these conversations, there's sometimes you meet because the self-awareness side, a lot of times to have that, you have to have some difficult conversations, sometimes internally by yourself, if you would, because there's some self-reflection that has to happen. And also with organizations, you have to almost, it feels like, have conversations about like areas where we maybe need to expose ourselves to improvement, or could put ourselves in situations where it may be perceived as a weakness, or I don't know what it is. But then the other part of it is, in some cases, some people think maybe we're doing enough. I don't know. So how, what does good look like, I guess, when we say that, how do we know that we're doing the right things or moving in the right direction? Or how can we showcase to people that, hey, we have work to do? What does that look like?
Yeah, I would contend to you that good is going to look different to different companies at different times in different parts of the world. So you have to be really self-aware and also aware of your immediate ecosystem, if you will, because it will change. But at the very least, it requires honesty, and it requires a real true self-evaluation of kind of what's going on. As I said to the Security Industry Association, for instance, there's a lot of talk now going on with regard to facial identity and facial recognition in terms of camera and security technologies. Now, that's some technology that can certainly do the world and people good, because it can protect people, it can protect assets, but it also with the wrong mindset, with the wrong intent, could also do a tremendous amount of harm from the standpoint of profiling, from the standpoint of creating more systemic barriers. So in your hands, individual company, how are you utilizing that technology in the space of your concentric circle of concern? And so that requires some very deep and probing questions about your intent, about your customer's intent, about how you even talk about those particular products. And so these are some areas that may be new, if you will, for keep talking about the security profession, but this is analogous to wherever you are. Going back to the security analogy, and this really has a great cross appeal. The introduction of AI, artificial intelligence. Now, we all know, especially as public affairs and even diversity professionals, that even artificial intelligence can be biased. Why? Because it is only as intelligent as those who program the AI to work in the first place. So when their biases are written into or embedded into this tool, it manifests itself in the final product as well. So how do we recognize that on the front end of product development, of product ideation, when we're thinking about product life cycles? How do we recognize these issues of how will this product or service impact a greater community from the standpoint of inclusion, from the standpoint of fairness, from the standpoint of equity? These are just all questions and considerations that, again, I submit to you, has to be in that ideation room before we release these products to the general public for consumption. And just real quick on the public
Yeah.
affairs, our public affairs group, I think at Johnson Controls, is very interesting because our group is actually comprised of a number of different discrete services or disciplines, if you will. And so we have a sustainability group within our public affairs group that talks about, of course, the traditional pieces of sustainability, from reduction of energy intensity and reduction of waste and greenhouse gas emissions and water conservation and things of that nature. But on the community side, which is another part of our the disciplines within our public affairs group, we talk about sustainability from the standpoint of what are those things that threaten the sustainability of communities. And those can be things such as food scarcity. Those can be things such as this great digital divide that we are now seeing across America as a result of COVID and everyone working remotely, how that has impacted some marginalized communities and urban communities in terms of their ability to connect to the world and be able to even work remotely. We talk about a broad range of things. So we have community, we have sustainability, and of course we have diversity as well. And we talk about how we can create that optimal environment within Johnson Controls where we can attract and retain the broadest array of people and help everyone feel like we are all included and valued and respected and have an opportunity to advance and succeed in our careers at Johnson Controls. So the public affairs dynamic at Johnson Controls may not be like the traditional company. I like to talk about our group as the conscience, if you will, of Johnson Controls, the hands, if you will, that provide the touch of corporate citizenry for Johnson Controls to the larger society.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, the fact that you do that, and that's wonderful, and some of the that you were talking about before, it sounds like there's a purposeful approach that's taken to this, right? Versus it just being someone that like intrinsically just known, right? Where you all are clearly have put the effort towards it, and are driving that as an initiative. So it's a fabric that is woven into the way that the company works, the people think. And if they don't, you're there to remind them or help them and work with them, and and push a message, if you would, in front of them. So when you're not there, they're thinking about it, and at some point it just becomes a part of the ethos or the culture. Is that fair?
Oh, that is spot on.
Right.
It's all about creating a culture to make sure that we are thinking and executing on these things. And of course, that starts from the top. And our leadership team, all the way from our CEO, George Oliver, all the way through the organization, continues to make sure that we, again, from the front line to the C-suite, are talking about those things that impact larger society from an environmental standpoint, a larger society from a social standpoint, and how we remain accountable and govern those items as we go through our day-to-day operations and duties and things of that nature. How do we operationalize, if you will, environmental and social initiatives within the way we do work at Johnson Controls? Because again, as I mentioned in our Securing New Grounds conference, we just believe that when we can create equitable practices internally, there is an intrinsic value to the community outside of our four walls where that bleeds through. So what makes sense from an inclusion and equity standpoint internally? We believe that as our people go out, they will continue to spread those values, that culture, to the communities outside of Johnson Controls as well.
Yeah, which takes on a bigger meaning than just being the salesperson for a product at that point, right? That's sort of the mindset of being a citizen of the community and everybody else, which is a great way to do it. What are your thoughts on this as someone who looks in, because actually on the sustainability side, and it bleeding in now into the diversity and inclusion side, right? So when I'm developing AI or a product or whatever it might be, there's a lot that I got to think about. Not only just like the user experience now, I also have to think about sort of the down market effects that frankly you see in a lot of areas, especially in the technology side, where you could tell that they maybe haven't thought like how this thing that is made to bring people together could also be used as a weapon, if you would, right? So like the what if conversations that you can tell that sometimes it's not done. But as a product person, it makes me also wonder, as these things become far more complicated, like with the AI and big data and facial recognition, that I think we've seen this even in the currently with COVID, like with health and thermal cameras. And I always worry about the utilization of some of our technology, where you see people publicizing all these things now, where it's sort of like if you don't have a mask on, it'll vocally say so. It's like marginalizing the already marginalized in that regard. Of like all of a sudden now I could have a false positive. I walk into a restaurant, it bings and bongs at me, and now I'm in a neighborhood and it thinks I have COVID when it was just hot outside or whatever. Right now, all of a sudden, Saturday at my son's football game, the people are thinking. Yeah, so it's like just because we were trying to do a good thing, right? And it just makes me wonder sometimes. What are your thoughts on how you approach like permission, if you would, to actually be working on that or doing that versus is this a place where good partnership comes into place where you bring people in? Like, it makes me wonder a lot of times, like in our industry, I wonder if because we're so focused, like say on access control, when if we focused on access care, that you would bring the community in. And if you switch the idea being about like, instead of us focusing on trying to keep the bad people out, how about we focus on how do we get the good people in, right? Or something like that. It
Right,
makes
right.
me think sometimes.
Lee, I think what you're describing really is around the diversity of thought that is required when you are in the midst of these, trying to launch these great new initiatives or products or services. And that's why, again, it just underscores the importance of being a organization that has a broad enough appeal to attract the widest array of talent. Because if you don't have that talent in the room to start thinking about those things on the front end, you end up being, the test case, if you will, or the example case of, how not to do it. And no one wants to be in that category. And we've all seen some of these marketing campaigns and things of that nature that have fallen flat on their face and have offended different communities. And all of a sudden, everybody in the C-suite is apologizing as to how that got out and why that particular phrase or photograph that depicted people or a group of people in a negative light. Why wasn't that filtered out? And some of us sit back and think, that is so obvious. And so how did any group of people allow that to happen? Well, it happens when you don't have a wide array of talent in a room to help ferret out some of those things. And it also happens, as you mentioned, Lee, when you don't think about the impact on the communities that this particular service or product will ultimately impact. One of the things that we try to do at Johnson Controls, and this kind of goes in line with my training. I'm professionally trained as an attorney, and before this role, I was the general counsel of our battery business. But when you come up in the law, one of the things you learn, and people always tell you, is that there's always going to be two sides to each story, no matter what. And that you never really want to ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. And one of the great things about being a lawyer is not that you know it all, but that you know, hopefully, where to find the answers that you need. And so we don't necessarily set ourselves up to be subject matter experts on everything. And how things will impact the community, we certainly are not subject matter experts on. So we need to go and get the voice of the customer, the voice of the community, in order to understand what that impact really looks like in real. And when you don't take the time to do that in the proper way, you can run into some of the obstacles that we just talked about and come across, again, instead of looking like a responsible corporate citizen, you come across as one who's really more concerned with peddling your wares or pushing your product or service than really trying to understand how this will benefit the greater community when you have, and if you have a great product or service, at the end of the day, hopefully that's what it's going to do. It's going to benefit everyone. So we really want to start at that starting block of making sure that people understand, our culture understands how we deal with talent, how we embrace talent, how we make sure everyone that comes into Johnson Controls is feeling valued and feeling as they have a voice, because they do, so that we can really own some of those processes and steps around the value creation before we end up launching products into communities that could potentially be more harmful than good.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of having the sort of critical conversations and creating the space to allow the conversation to happen, and creating an environment where it's somewhat celebrated, if you would, to come up with it's like the classic, like, there is no stupid questions. It's like, like, let's talk about it, because if we talk about it, we identify, we know what's going to happen. I also, it makes me, so I'm a big believer in the idea that talent, especially now, is going to matter even more in our industry than it has. Traditionally, I just think, because of how many things are moving and going and doing we have an industry that everybody knows is sort of aging, if you would, and we've always celebrated tenure over talent in a lot of cases, because it's been a legacy business. And you're not saying that we need to get rid of the old and bring in the new. There needs to be a balance in that regard, because I actually think we need to celebrate the past more, because we probably would learn a lot too about things that come. So it's one of those areas that has to have purposeful approach and allowing it. And that's why I find you so interesting, and appreciate you bringing a different conversation to the market, if you would, and allowing, actually, it's in my opinion, I think now that I'm sitting here, just came to me, is like, what you did at Securing the Ground was you showed leadership in a lot of ways, to where people can go back to their own organization and say, I just listened to this amazing presentation. We need some of this too. And it's not, maybe they didn't feel that they could go have that, but now they can point to something that's sort of like sanctioned by our association to have that happen. And that's why I'm thankful that we created the space for those types of conversations to happen. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Lee, because at the end of the day, it's really all about creating more business value as well. It's great for society to have companies be serious about their corporate citizenship in terms of bettering society. But we all know that at the end of the day, a company is only in existence if it can continue to be profitable and be impactful. And when we talk about corporate citizenship, it's not exclusive from being a highly impactful, profitable company. They can go hand in hand. And in fact, we believe that great corporate citizenship only enhances your value proposition in terms of how you contribute to the greater society through products and services. And we also think, that, at Johnson Controls, I tell people all the time, sure, we could go out and potentially stroke a check and support some community organizations that are doing some great work. And sometimes we do that. But I think the greatest gift that we give to the communities and where Johnson Controls is located is that we have a culture of inviting our people to serve in the community through volunteerism, through nonprofit board service, just through the giving of their time and their talents to organizations that are really trying to make those communities where we live and learn and play and stay operate just a little bit better. And again, that's why we think when we are talking about equitable practices inside, when our people go outside and serve in those types of capacities, they continue to spread that type of mindset, that type of goodwill, and create more equitable, livable, sustainable communities.
Well said. Well, Grady, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. People want to find out more information about you, but then also the Johnson Controls. Where's the best place to go do that?
Sure. They certainly should look up johnsoncontrols.com and look at our vision of being the world's best company with regard to creating more safe, comfortable, and sustainable spaces and places. For myself individually, I'm certainly available on LinkedIn. And all you have to do is pretty much search Grady Crosby at Johnson Controls and you'll find me. And on Twitter, I'm HU Grady. That's my Twitter handle. And so I invite conversation and dialogue through that medium as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. We're on a Friday afternoon when we did this, so appreciate you doing that. And I look forward to continuing the conversation and having another opportunity to do this with you again. So thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Lee. Thank you.
No problem.